Hey, hello and welcome. My name's Paul Ryder and welcome to the video all around the difference between healthy guilt or toxic guilt. Now, these two areas are confusing to say the least because when I teach about emotionally manipulative behavior, the one area that I talk about is emotionally manipulative behavior hides in plain sight. It poses as one thing, but is something completely different. Now, for me, I've got a lot of other videos on this channel and I explain about the 6 emotionally manipulative behaviors, and each one of those relies on a different emotional vulnerability in their target. Each one of those 6 emotionally manipulative behaviors relies on a specific emotional vulnerability in their target. So where does healthy guilt and toxic guilt fit into all of this? Well, if we look at the terminology of what guilt actually is a belief that I have done something wrong. Now, if you look at healthy guilt and say, for example, you broke somebody's phone or you let somebody down when you said you were going to be there, or you've done something that you promised and then fell back on that. If you feel guilt that you've done something wrong, well, that's very healthy because you said you were going to do one thing, and I'm not talking about here if something came up or it was a challenge to be able to get there, but if you just knowingly let that person down or knowingly broke something of somebody else's property, that is healthy guilt. It's a belief within ourselves that we work within a social ecosystem, and if we've done something wrong, that means it's going to be a threat to that social ecosystem, because if we keep doing things that could threaten our environment, people are going to want to move away from us. So in essence, it's a survival instinct, a guidance in ourselves that we're doing something wrong, we're going off track. So with healthy guilt, that's a really good thing because it helps guide us and keep us safe, again, within our social ecosystem. But what about toxic guilt? Well, toxic guilt will be a stage where a person would say sorry for everything. It could be they're in a shop and they walk past somebody a little bit too close and then immediately say, I'm really, really sorry. Or people who work ridiculously long hours because they have that inherent guilt that if they don't do all of that work, they're going to be letting the team down. Now, just to add into that, I've done a lot of research on this over the years, and I'm sure you know this yourself anyway, but a lot of companies, a lot of businesses out there do rely on the undertone of guilt that people will feel in order for them to carry on working ridiculously long hours. And because guilt is a belief, I've done something wrong, all that corporation or that business or the manager would need to imply is that here's your workload. They know it would probably take about 60 hours to do, but they say here's a week's worth of work, expecting it to be done in 38. So what that person will do then, if they are carrying toxic guilt, is do all of the work, keep on going, even though it works in their own time. And this is why you get people working in their own time at home, not seeing their children, not being with their partner, working weekends, because they have this belief inside themselves that they have done something wrong, even though they're not doing something wrong. So how does this add up then? How is it different between healthy guilt and toxic guilt? Well, healthy guilt is seeing the situation as it is. Again, if we've done something wrong, if we've broke somebody's property or we've let somebody down and we just didn't bother to turn up, that's healthy guilt. We've done something wrong. So healthy guilt is coming from our external reality. We've taken an action today. We're getting feedback going, we've actually done something wrong here. Whereas toxic guilt doesn't come from the external world. It comes from our internal world, a belief that I always do something wrong. Now, if, for example, the formulation of toxic guilt usually comes from when a person is a child, they were always told off for something. They will always seem to be in the way. They were always seen to do something wrong. I remember with my own dad, everything I did was wrong. I was always constantly getting told off about something, irrespective of whether I'd actually done something wrong or not. And it was because of his inability to cope with his own reality, and his frustration built up, and he projected that onto me. Not just me, he projected that onto everybody. But because in my reality, all I saw was my dad saying, "You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're making all these mistakes," irrespective of whether I was or not, I chose to believe that I was. I didn't choose to, it was just something that was forced into our mind. When we're children, we are vulnerable and very pliable. So it's somebody else's belief that we've taken on board. Because what we do as children, we look at the whole aspect of the world. And if it says that 80% of the people around us tell us that we're doing something wrong, we tend to believe that because we've got no other reference point. Now, if we form a belief that who I am makes mistakes, and then we go on to live our lives today, if we carry that belief with us, who I am keeps making mistakes, I don't know why I keep making all these mistakes, but I'm just fundamentally wrong. What we can do is be in work, and somebody might give us 60 hours worth of work to do and expect it to be done in 40. So rather than looking at the actual situation and saying, well, there's 60 hours worth of work here, I can't do that because it's going to require 60 hours, not 40, it could trigger that toxic belief of we have done something wrong. So we would immediately put ourselves on the back foot and say, well, I should be able to do this in 60 hours because if I can't, it means I'm wrong. And again, this is how so many businesses, unfortunately, drive people into the ground and cause extreme stress reactions. They don't say, I expect you to do 60 hours worth of work in 40. What they do is they say, here is a workload. You know it takes 60 hours. They expect it done in 40. And if you're carrying toxic guilt, you will force yourself into that environment. They don't even have to explain it through. You will. But it doesn't have to just be in the workplace. This could be in, say, romantic relationships or marriages, for example. A person could constantly make demands on you in some way, shape, and form. And if you've got a toxic guilt complex, no matter what that person asks of you, no matter what that person demands of you, if you can't physically do it or you haven't got the emotional capacity to do it in a very healthy way, you just don't have capacity, you could then take it upon yourself to say, I need to do better. I should be working harder. I need to be a better person. And then what you do is you keep flogging yourself into the ground. And no matter what you do, the other person might still say, well, you've done that now, but I expect more. You've done that now, I expect more. And if you are carrying that toxic guilt trait, then no matter what they do, no matter what they say, no matter how much they ask of you, no matter how much they demand of you, you will keep forcing yourself to work harder and harder and harder. And if you wake up one morning and feel absolutely exhausted and you cannot do what's being demanded of you by other people, it could be that you are out of balance and the people around you are asking too much of you. And rather than being able to step back and say, actually, what you're asking of me here is very unhealthy and your expectations are too high, it's not actually possible to do what you're asking of me. That toxic guilt might keep saying, well, you're the problem and you should work harder. They're not asking too much of you. It's you. You're the one who's flawed. Now, in summary of all this, toxic guilt is very destructive, and again, there are millions of people each and every day in the corporate environment who are having nervous breakdowns, total exhaustion, because it's being implied that they should be working harder than they actually are. But unfortunately, this is never going to end unless the individual with toxic guilt starts to look within themselves and say, is it me who's actually making myself the problem here? thereby trying to do everything that everybody asks of me, flogging myself into the ground to absolute exhaustion. The one thing I will say about toxic guilt is that if you have a person in your life and they're constantly making demands of you, then ask yourself, is it just that one person? Or do you find that you do this with lots of other people? You see, when I'm working through one-to-one with people around toxic guilt, what I tend to find is the person might say, well, I'm in a relationship with a person who is making all these demands on me, and no matter what I do, it never seems to be enough. And then I'll ask them, what about your previous relationship? What about all of the other people in your life? And it very often happens where people say, this happens many other areas in my life as well. And that is the challenge with toxic guilt. You see, if it's happening not with just one person, but with many people in your life, what is the one common denominator in all of that? And it could be you. Now, that's not to blame you. That's not to say that you're wrong. But if you are the one who's carrying a belief about yourself that you're not doing enough, you should work harder, then that's open game for anybody who wants to control and manipulate another person through, say, for example, the oppressor victim emotional manipulative behavior. It is important to look outside ourselves and see, are other people manipulating us, yes or no? Because there could be a very real challenge that we're experiencing today. But for me, as a trauma therapist, the one thing I always implore everybody to do is look in the mirror. Is it you that's carrying a belief about yourself that you should try harder, you need to do more, you're letting people down? And keep in mind the difference between healthy guilt, which is the external reality today, and have we actually done something wrong? And toxic guilt, where we have a belief that no matter what's demanded of us, no matter what's asked of us, we will keep working and working and working, even at the detriment of our own physical health. So I hope this video helps to differentiate between healthy guilt, which is when we look outside ourselves and see reality of, are we actually doing something wrong, yes or no? And if we are, then to change our behavior so it doesn't damage our social connections. Versus toxic guilt, which is no matter what is demanded of us, we force ourselves into believing that we are wrong. Usually that's from a trauma response of maybe emotional abuse that we faced in our own past. So as with everything on these videos, I suggest get your journal out, start reflecting on things, start writing things down. Do you find yourself apologizing for everything, even though you know that you haven't done something wrong? Do you find yourself working endless amounts of hours for a job that no matter how hard you work, yet more is put on your plate? Or what about in your relationships? Do people make demands on you again and again and again and again? And even though the deeper part of you knows that they're making too many demands on you and it's unhealthy, you still find yourself apologizing to that person and keep working harder and harder and harder, again, to the detriment of your physical and mental and emotional health. So if you have any thoughts or suggestions or ideas or experiences that you've had in relation to this, feel free to put them in the comments below. I love reading the comments. And also, one thing to say is that if you put a comment down of something you've realized about your life or an experience you've had, you never know, that comment that you wrote might change another person's life forever. It's about us all working together to help everybody grow.